Hello everyone, I'm Kenshin. Welcome to Talking History. Please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Also, don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. Today's historical discussion is the once high-value Zimbabwean dollar. Recently, central banks around the world have been striving to combat global inflation by raising interest rates. For instance, the Federal Reserve in the United States raised its benchmark rate by 3 points in one go, aiming to combat an inflation rate as high as 8.6%. However, people have to face the consequences. However, raising interest rates to combat inflation is not a universally effective strategy. For example, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe announced on June 27, 2022, that the policy rate would be increased from 80% to 200% starting from July 1, earning the title of the most hawkish central bank in this way. This new measure resulted in a cumulative increase of 14,000 basis points in interest rates in the country this year, breaking all records of central banks worldwide. But even so, experts believe that raising extremely high interest rates may have limited effectiveness in suppressing the country's high inflation rate. Because the country's inflation rate has risen to triple digits for 2 consecutive months, with inflation in June soaring to 192%, food costs have more than doubled, and the country's currency has depreciated by over 2/3 against the US dollar this year, making it the worst performing currency in Africa. However, this is not the worst moment. In 2008, due to rampant hyperinflation, the value of the currency depreciated rapidly, and the Zimbabwean central bank issued $100 trillion banknotes, attracting international attention. Today, these banknotes have become collectibles, but they are often used as jokes. It's hard to imagine that they were once a strong currency on par with the US dollar, isn't it? Today, let's talk about the rise and fall of the Zimbabwean dollar. Rhodesia, a country rich in natural resources, renamed Zimbabwe after gaining independence from British colonial rule in the 1980s. Due to its colonial history with Britain, Zimbabwe was second only to South Africa in terms of economic strength in Africa, with a strong agricultural sector known as the breadbasket of Africa. Even its industrial sector was not lacking. With such a developed agricultural and industrial economy and abundant natural resources, the country was truly enviable. However, due to this, when the newly issued Zimbabwean dollar was first introduced, the exchange rate with the US dollar was approximately 1 to 1.47. At that time, the Zimbabwean dollar was one of the few currencies in the world that was very valuable, even more so than the US dollar. But why did it end up in today's situation? This brings us to the biggest chaos: the land reform implemented by the government. The reason behind it was to break free from Britain's economic control over Zimbabwe. At that time, President Mugabe implemented strict land reforms. Because there were about 4,500 landowners in Zimbabwe at the time, who owned about 75% of the land, most of whom were white, while the majority of black Africans owned only the remaining 25%. At first, Britain supported this, with funding from the UK and effort from Zimbabwe, both sides working together. However, things did not develop as expected. Even the British government found the situation increasingly strange, realizing that the money invested was not just a bubble, but it was gone without a trace, with no results whatsoever. But Britain wasn't foolish. How could they watch their pounds disappear without a trace? Once the investigation was conducted, the whole situation exploded. It turned out that all this money had been swallowed by people within the Zimbabwean government. Government officials indulged in luxury while the common people suffered from hunger and cold, with even affording food becoming a problem. After the British government found out, they naturally became furious and immediately ordered the cessation of all economic aid. The shameless Zimbabwean government, seeing that the situation was revealed, should have humbly sought forgiveness and asked Britain to come back. However, Zimbabwe chose to tear up its face. Didn't I mention earlier that most of the landowners were white? Zimbabwe directly confiscated the land of white landowners by force, leading to the complete breakdown of friendship with Britain. What followed was a large-scale policy of discriminating against white people, forcing white people who were originally in Zimbabwe to leave as quickly as possible. In the 1990s, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, made adjustments, and due to reasons such as reduced aid from Europe and the US and the Congo War, the country's economy shrank by half in 10 years. At the height of hyperinflation, 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars could buy 5 bottles of water in the morning, but only 2 bottles in the afternoon. Do you think this made Zimbabwe a paradise for black people? How could things be so simple? Forget about enjoying happiness. After losing white technical support, the former breadbasket became worthless, similar to the current trend of foreign capital withdrawal from closed countries. But even in such dire circumstances, Zimbabwe seemed to be getting richer. How was this possible? From 1980 to 2000, Zimbabwe's national income seemed to have more than tripled. It's hard to believe that the people of Zimbabwe were becoming richer and richer. In reality, it was just simply issuing currency with higher denominations. Despite this, the citizens were still struggling with hunger and poverty, and often, even simple things in life would cost millions. Sometimes, Zimbabwean millionaires couldn't even afford a meal. How ridiculous. The denominations of the first generation of Zimbabwean currency were in the millions, and the second generation was even more absurd, rising to the billion level, with the highest denomination reaching 100 billion. The outrageous prices led to widespread complaints. In 2006, Zimbabwean leaders began another round of currency reform, replacing old currency with new currency at a ratio of 1,000 to 1. The official exchange rate with the US dollar was announced to be 250 to 1, but the terrifying figure on the black market was as high as 600 to 1 at the time. How much of a failure was this policy? Despite initially making Zimbabwean currency denominations shrink by a factor of 1,000, it seemed as if the citizens were suddenly rich again. But in reality, that wasn't the case. The country was truly poor with nothing left except money. When buying breakfast or groceries, people would directly measure the money by weight for consumption. It was truly unmatched in the world. Next came the third generation of currency, with the largest denomination reaching a staggering 100 trillion. Such rapid inflation only plunged the people deeper into dire straits, making it difficult for them to help themselves. Although the currency was updated many times, the poverty level of this country continued to worsen, making it extremely difficult to recover. The Zimbabwean currency was officially abandoned in 2015, becoming the least valuable currency in the world. At that time, $1 could be exchanged for 35 quadrillion Zimbabwean dollars, with 15 zeros following the 35. It was too many zeros to count. In September of that year, Zimbabwe officially announced the withdrawal of the currency from circulation, becoming a thing of the past. Returning to the present, the whole world is now dealing with inflation in their own countries. There is no time to worry about the situation in other countries, especially for Zimbabwe. If they don't completely overhaul their currency, there will be no solution in sight. The country announced for the second time that it will adopt the US dollar as its legal currency within the next 5 years to boost market confidence. They hope to turn things around with the US dollar, but honestly, if the domestic economy doesn't recover, even gold won't help. John Mangudya, governor of the Central Bank of Zimbabwe, pointed out that rising inflation weakens consumer demand and confidence. Failing to control it will reverse the significant economic gains made by the country over the past 2 years. But I wonder, what significant economic gains are they talking about? Even with the most hawkish rate hikes globally this time, economist G. A. van der Linde of the Oxford Economics Research Institute believes that higher interest rates are unlikely to curb the country's high inflation rate. The current economic situation is not optimistic, and living conditions are expected to continue to deteriorate in the short term. Even Zimbabwe's high inflation has made it difficult for people to make ends meet. Local teachers have requested to be paid in US dollars, and the economic hardship has led to rumors of selling toes for money. The central bank announced that it will begin issuing gold coins as legal tender starting in late July, But this has been met with skepticism from the public, which was expected.